Welcome to Lesson 11 of How to Understand Quranic Grammar series. Last lesson we were introduced to some of the most fundamental concepts of Arabic morphology. We understood the concept of verb roots and that all words including verbs go back to a three-letter root. We also learned that the measures of words are like molds and that each of these measures contributes to forming the meaning of the word. And most importantly, we understood what a pattern of a verb is. And here I gotta say that if any of these concepts is not 100% understood, then I highly recommend going back to Lesson 10 to remember what these concepts were. And today we're going to have a closer and more detailed look at the measures of Arabic verbs. We also call them verb forms. So let's get started. As we've learned last time, there are 10 forms or measures for Arabic verbs, which in other words means that there are 10 different ways we can see a verb in Arabic. And we'll study them through this table, which will be the main focus of this lesson and many lessons to come. And the first thing I want to tell you here is that don't get intimidated by this table. From the first glance, it might seem that it is a lot, and it may look confusing too. But when you understand how it works, it will get much easier inshallah. And the more you use it, the more familiar it gets. So the most important thing is that you keep using it and applying the knowledge that you acquire as you go. I'm going to start by answering the most important questions that you might be thinking about now after seeing this table. First, why is this table important? Well, a single verb in Arabic can come in different shapes and forms, depending on the time, the voice, and which pronoun is used with it, and many other factors. Like for example, the verb kataba. It can be found in the Quran as kataba, kutiba, yaktubu, yuktabu, katabu, uktubu, maktub, and also katib. And in fact, these are not all the variations of that verb. So imagine if you have to learn every single variation to know their meaning. That is very hard, of course. So instead of doing this, by following this table, you memorize the measure or the mold and learn what kind of meaning it adds to the base of the verb. So kataba is, as you can see, from the past form because it has the pattern fa'ala. And if it has the pattern fa'ala, this means it belongs to form number 1, and therefore its present form will have the pattern yaf'alu. This means that its present form is yaktubu. And once you decide which form this verb uses, the rest becomes much easier, because you can just simply check the rest of the patterns of the verb through the chart. So yaktubu is then the present, to write. Katabu is the past form, but with a suffix of the plural pronoun, as we've learned in Lesson 8. Katib is then the same verb, but using the active participle measure. So it would then mean writer. Kutiba is the passive voice of the past, so it would mean was written, and so on. So in order to get an idea about the meaning of each of these words, it would be enough to know the meaning of the base form of the verb, and you'll be able to find your way through the rest of the words that are related to this root. And we'll learn more about how we can use this chart as we progress through this lesson. The second question is, how can we use this table? The patterns that we see here all represent the verbs in their basic or base form without prefixes or suffixes. This means that what we have learned in lessons 8 and 9 about pronouns and verb conjugation will be very important in this situation, because then you can add these prefixes or suffixes to the beginning or the end of the verb to properly conjugate it. But it also works the other way around, which means that if you see a verb with a certain suffix, you would know which part of the word is the base form and which part of it is the suffix. This will enable you to trace the verb back to the chart and use the chart more effectively. Third, do we have to learn all of this all at once? And the answer is, if you're able to memorize it all, that would definitely be a good advantage. That is eventually our goal. But it is really not necessary to do it all at once. Why? Because not all of these patterns are equally important or equally common in the Quran. For example, these ones here are the most important ones, which you should definitely start with. Then these. And last, you should learn these. Which means that you should make sure to learn past, present, and imperative forms along with the gerund and the active participle first, since these are the most common in the Quran. And once you get the hang of them, you move on to the passive forms, and last, you end by learning these ones. Using the chart will also help you remember where to find what. And since we're discussing the verb forms now, the 85% lists will be back inshallah, and every time I will give you a list that belongs to one of the forms. So you will learn a form in detail and all the verbs that are mentioned in the Quran that use that form. Which means you will learn one form with its corresponding list inshallah. Okay, now that we understand the basics of this chart and how to use it, let's dive deeper into it. This table, as you can see, is divided into 4 major columns: the meaning of the measure type, verbs, and nouns. The first column gives you the meaning that is added when the verb comes in this form. So for example, and as we've discussed last time, if the verb came in the second form of فَعَلَ, it would add this dimension to the root meaning of the verb. The second column is the type of the measure, which is given in Roman numerals. They go from 1 to 10. The reason why I'm using the Roman numerals is that they are more universal in this context. Then we see that the verbs column is divided into active and passive. And for those who don't know, active or passive refers to the state of the subject. Like when we say, the boy kicked the ball. Here, the boy is an active subject. But if you want to make the boy a passive subject, we would say, the ball was kicked by the boy. This is a passive sentence, and the passive verb in this case is was kicked. So this is the difference between active and passive. And since there are far more active verbs in the Quran, it is logical to start with the 3 main conjugations of the active verbs first. And as for the nouns column, it refers to nouns that are formed from verbs. Like the gerund, for example. The gerund is a verb that turned into a noun. Like when we say in English, swimming is fun. Here the word swimming is a gerund. The origin of the word swimming is swim. And in Arabic we call the gerund masdar. The active participle is like the doer of the verb, which we partially discussed last time. And in Arabic it is ismul fa'il, which is like going from play to player. The passive participle is like the recipient or the receiver state, or in Arabic, اسم المفعول. Like when we say a spoken message. And as for place and time, they are words that refer to places or times which are derived from the root of the verb. And in Arabic we call them اسم المكان and اسم الزمان. And we'll see examples from the Quran for each of these categories when we start learning the verb lists of each verb form. Now, it is important to know that this table is quite regular, meaning that all verbs of all forms follow these patterns all the time, with exception of the first form. This form is a bit problematic since it has many variations of its own. And as you can see, there is a letter in red, which indicates that this letter can appear with fatha, dhamma, or kasra, so not a fixed short vowel like the rest as you can see. So let's have a look at an example from the Quran as to how useful this chart can be. وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. We see many different variations of the same root. Now, if you know the meaning of this root, it will solve so many problems for you. The root which I'm talking about here is makara, which is a Form 1 verb. Why? Because it follows the same pattern as fa'ala, makara, fa'ala, and it means to plan or to scheme. So now that we know that makara belongs to measure number 1, we would then conclude that the present form is yamkur, because it has the pattern yaf'ul, which would then mean plan. And the imperative form is umkur, again with the pattern uf'ul. The past passive would then be mukira, was planned. And the present passive would then be yumkar, is planned. The gerund or the masdar, so then the noun form of the verb, makr, and it would then mean planning or a plan. The active participle, or ismul fa'il, would then be makir, and that would of course mean planner. The passive participle, or ismul maf'ul, would then be mamkur, and the place and time, so ismul zaman and ismul makan, would then be mumkar. So just by knowing the meaning of the root of the verb and knowing which measure it belongs to, we knew the meaning of all of these words that belong to the same root. Now let's find out if this information was of any use to us when we want to analyze an ayah in the Quran. Now here we see the first word, which is makaru. It is a verb that has a suffix at the end of it, which is waw and alif. And this is the suffix of the hidden plural pronoun they, which we learned in lesson number 8. So makaru means they planned. Makara is a past verb in the third person form because it is followed by the word that did the verb, that is Allah. So makara Allah means Allah planned. And then we see at the end of the ayah the word al-makirin. So makirin has the suffix ya nun, which is a suffix that we learned before in this series, which means that this word is in the plural form. So in order to get the base form of this word, we need to remove the suffix. And when we remove the suffix, we will end up with makir, which is, as we've learned, is the active participle of the verb makara, which then means planner. So the meaning would be, so they planned and Allah planned, but Allah is the best planner. Now I think by now you should be familiar enough with this chart to be working with it on your own. For this reason, I'm giving you a very similar verse that you're going to analyze using the chart and the information that you've learned in this lesson. And to give you a little help, the last word of this ayah comes from the root sha'ara, which means to sense or to notice. So analyze this entire ayah, and as for the last word, I want you to give me all the possible variations of this measure. So this chart, along with knowing the meaning of the base form of the most frequently used verbs in the Quran, will be a very powerful tool for you to understand the meaning of verses very easily, inshallah. And if you want more training, check out the description for the homework of this lesson. And of course, download the poster of today's chart. It is very important that you download it and print it to have it by your side to help you understand the Quran better. And as always, don't forget to show me your answers and to ask all questions related to this topic in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I hope you have learned something new today. If you did, please like and share the video for other people to learn from it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you want to see more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.